And if there are no questions on any of that, I will call this meeting to order and ask Michelle to please take attendance to ensure we have a quorum.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen? Chambliss?
Here.
Cummings?
Here.
Johnson? Lee?
Here.
Lilligren?
Here.
Lindstrom?
Here.
Musset?
Here.
Vento?
Here.
Wolf?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And we do have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is our agenda, and members can see the posted agenda. And if there are no objections or changes, we can move on to our business. Any changes on the agenda? Hearing none, the next item is approval of our minutes from the February 1st, 2021 meeting, and I would entertain a motion to approve.
Vento moves approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Lindstrom.
Thank you, council members. Discussion on that motion, corrections or changes? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the minutes.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen? Chambliss?
Aye.
Cummings?
Aye.
Johnson? Lee?
Aye.
Lilligren?
Aye.
Lindstrom?
Aye.
Musset?
Aye.
Vento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That item carries, and we'll move on to our business items. The first is 2021-37. It's Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan from the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. And Colin Kelly is here to present on that. Mr. Kelly, welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Colin Kelly, planning analyst, and I'm here to present the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan on behalf of Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I should note that Emma Pachuta and Adam Arvidsson, both with Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, are here today on the line and may join us at the end of the presentation if needed and as appropriate. Next slide, please. Above the Falls Regional Park is located near the center of the regional park system. The figure you see on the left is figure 1 in the staff report. The regional park surrounds and includes 2.75 miles of the Mississippi River in Minneapolis and extends from the Plymouth Avenue Bridge on the south end to the Camden Bridge on the north end. The figures in the middle and on the right are figures 2 and 3 in the staff report. Above the Falls is one of a series of regional parks that encompass the Mississippi River, its banks, and adjacent lands in Minneapolis. To the north is North Mississippi Regional Park. To the south is Central Mississippi Riverfront, Mississippi Gorge, and Minnehaha Regional Parks. Like other regional parks along the river in Minneapolis, Above the Falls is made up of distinctly named park units, some connected by linear park features and trails. These existing park units form the foundation of the regional park and will benefit from the implementation of this master plan. A few of the existing parks and other locations that play a prominent role in the master plan, such as Upper Harbor Terminal and Graco Park, have been called out in the figure on the right. Next slide, please. Community and partner engagement has been and will continue to be a key part of the Above the Falls planning process. The list of people and organizations on this slide are examples of who is engaged through many different conversations and activities over many years. This is not an all-encompassing list and cannot fully capture the hundreds of people engaged, the dozens of community events, or the many, many hours spent by the Above the Falls Citizen Advisory Committee or Riverfront Technical Advisory Committee. It's simply meant to illustrate the many different types of people and organizations involved in the process, from adjacent neighborhoods to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and many folks in between, including the Mississippi Riverfront Partnership, Juxtaposition Arts, and the Friends of the Mississippi River. Next slide, please. So what did those participants say? Well, people want to experience and access the river. Some of the ways that could be accomplished is through continuous and looping trails that make connections into neighborhoods, providing boat access and gathering places, and offering recreation activities for all ages. People also want to restore and improve the river to include natural and open spaces with restored habitat, native plantings and gardens, and clean water. And perhaps more than anything else, people want equitable development. That means equitable distribution of park access points and park development, and designing with and for a diverse population so that they are able to access the public health benefits of parks. In particular, participants were eager to see benefits to and for the residents of North and Northeast Minneapolis. Next slide, please. The Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan is rooted in equity, as the fundamental goal is to provide parks and access to the Mississippi River in an area of the city that currently lacks these opportunities. Areas around the park in North and Northeast Minneapolis have high poverty rates, a higher than average rate of negative health issues, and a high percentage of BIPOC and youth populations. The master plan and staff report cite data from Hennepin County's Survey of the Health of All the Population and the Environment, or SHAPE survey, as it's sometimes known. Adjacent neighborhoods like Near North, Hawthorne, McKinley, Camden, Marshall Terrace, Bottineau, and Sheridan struggle with disinvestment and lack of positive economic activity. Transforming the land from industrialized shoreland to ecologically rich, publicly owned parkland will improve the quality of life in an underserved urban area and have profound benefits for residents and visitors alike. The short-term goal is to support affordable and easily accessible opportunities for outdoor recreation where they will make an immediate positive impact. The long-term benefits are that the park will contribute to sustainable regional growth, support private investments, and foster a healthier environment beyond the park's physical boundaries. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Greg.
Yeah, it's hung up on this slide. There it goes.
Thank you. The regional park surrounds and includes approximately 375 acres of the Mississippi River and its banks along a 2.7-mile stretch through North and Northeast Minneapolis. Approximately 64 acres, or about 45% of the 140 upland or non-water acres, are currently under Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board ownership. That means the majority of land within the park's administrative boundary is not yet owned by MPRB. However, MPRB is working toward an agreement with the city to assume ownership of about 20 acres of Upper Harbor Terminal as parkland. In the figure on the right, you can see how the regional park boundary, indicated by the dashed red line, only includes a portion of the purple polygon labeled Upper Harbor Terminal. This is figure 4 in the staff report. Because the regional park is an urban infill park, acquisition of additional parkland will occur incrementally over time, depending on funding and as purchase and easement opportunities arise through MPRB's engagement with willing sellers. Next slide, please. In developing new park elements within the regional park, facilities will be designed to meet or exceed requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. First and foremost, the regional park is intended to provide public access to the Mississippi River and to enhance the habitat, structure, and function of the river and its environs. The plan calls for the construction of new parkways and trails, some of which will be integrated into the Minneapolis Grand Rounds. An extension of West River Parkway to the north will help to achieve that vision. Continued development of the East Bank Trail will help to further the vision of a trail loop system that will offer opportunities for making connections within the park, around the river, and to and from adjacent neighborhoods. The park concept also proposes new park spaces and continued improvement to existing park spaces. In the continued improvement category, the development concept for Graco Park is to establish a riverfront recreation destination with a mix of attractions including a pebble beach, park pavilion, water recreation outfitting, a lawn, strolling paths, and a nature walk across the length of Halls Island, accessed by pedestrian bridges across the newly created channel. Some of this work has been completed, but there is a lot of work remaining. The development concept for Sheridan Memorial Park includes a large public art installation and river overlook plaza, a nature-based play area, strolling paths, stormwater treatment measures, and shoreline habitat enhancements. A lot of this work has already been completed. In the new park spaces category is Upper Harbor Terminal, and that's where we'll focus some attention on the next slide. Next slide, please. The redevelopment of the 48-acre city-owned Upper Harbor Terminal offers a significant opportunity for both MPRB and the City of Minneapolis, as well as all residents of the region. The former barge terminal closed in 2014. As mentioned, MPRB is working with the city to assume ownership of approximately 20 acres. The redevelopment vision includes the extension of West River Parkway, creation of linear green space and signature gathering places, and reshaping of shoreline and habitat enhancements. As the master plan notes, quote, the extension of West River Parkway through the full length of the regional park will establish the public access spine for the West Banks Linear Park, as well as adjacent redevelopment. Plans for private redevelopment are being reviewed and developed and generally include an outdoor music venue and a mix of development uses including residential, office, hospitality, and light industrial. Next slide, please. The plan estimates $168,201,200 in acquisition costs and $16 million in development costs. Taken together, the total cost estimate for acquisition and development is $184,201,200. Because of the regional park's urban setting and the desire to transform the Upper River Corridor from private land to public park, land assembly will be an ongoing effort. It is likely to take many years, and possibly multiple decades, to fully implement the vision contained in this master plan. I should note that the development cost estimates here focus on Upper Harbor Terminal and Graco Park at this time. Finally, approval of the master plan does not commit the council to any funding at this time. Next slide, please. The Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1, Master Plan requirements, as well as other council policies included in Thrive MSP 2040. Next slide, please. So the proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council approve Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan, require Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, prior to initiating any new development of the regional park, to send preliminary plans to the Environmental Services Assistant Manager at the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division, and to advise the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to implement the comments in the analysis for natural resources and transit. I should note that with one abstention, 7 Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commissioners voted in favor of recommending the proposed actions at their meeting on February 4th. No commissioners voted to oppose the proposed actions. And with that, I will stand for any comments or questions you may have, and will remind you that MPRB staff is on hand as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kelly, and our thanks to our partners at Minnesota Park and Recreation Board for being here and for all your work on this very significant plan. Questions for Mr. Kelly or for our guests from MPRB?
Councilmember Vento has a question. Chair Lilligren.
Yeah, please, Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report, Colin. And I will do a full disclaimer here. I'm a member of the board of the Friends of the Mississippi River, and they have had they've done a lot of work on this issue. They are very committed to good development along the river, and have worked with the BIPOC community in the North Minneapolis area with regard to the Upper Harbor development. And I'm wondering if the issues regarding accessibility for people in that neighborhood have been addressed, or if there continue to be concerns about equitable opportunities and engagement for the BIPOC community.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Vento, that's an excellent question. My understanding in reviewing the master plan is that the Park and Recreation Board and the City of Minneapolis are doing just about everything in their power to engage nearby neighborhoods and residents of Minneapolis, North Minneapolis, Northeast Minneapolis, on the other side of the river. But I would also welcome Emma or Adam to speak more directly to that issue.
Emma or Adam, anything to add?
Hi, Colin. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Pachuta. I'm with the Minneapolis Park Board. Thanks for your question, Councilmember Vento. I think as Colin mentioned in his presentation, we named that we're going to be working with under all of our projects will be under ADA. And I would say that right now, specifically Graco Park and Upper Harbor Terminal actually have their own full-on planning process with a community advisory committee and a process for community engagement. And so we are really trying to work really closely with the community to really understand and identify what ADA or accessibility looks like at a more site-specific focus. And so the plan here just kind of gives that broad outline, and then we're really working with community on more of those specific projects. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Emma. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Emma. That is helpful. I want to make a statement. I don't want it to come across as harsh or bossy, but early in my tenure as a member of the Friends of the Mississippi River Board, we did a retreat and a tour, and the tour was of the Upper Harbor area. And this was years ago before the planning began. And I have to say, and this is the part that's probably going to sound harsh and bossy, but I have to say that I was shocked at the contentiousness of the planning process that occurred. And Paul Bachnight is a very dear colleague of mine on the Friends board, and I have nothing but the deepest respect for him. And I trust his instincts. So I would ask, and this is not just to the Minneapolis Park Board, this is for all of us who strive for quality community engagement. I had the sense throughout this process that as it related to the Upper Harbor, the plans were made and then they were brought to the public, and we were all to nod our head and say, yes, sir, 3 bags full. And that's the former elementary teacher and me coming out. That's not community engagement. Community engagement is when we get a place at the table early on before plans are being made and before decisions are being made and before the private sector carves out its part of the turf that they want in the project. It includes everybody from the get-go. And so I would just ask that, and like I said, this is not just directed at Minneapolis, this is directed at all of us and throughout the metro area, that we keep this as open as a process when it comes to planning as possible. I think it gives us credibility. It further enhances our efforts. It makes people feel included. I live in a neighborhood where right now there's talk of redevelopment of a very treasured area, and the anger in my neighborhood is not pretty. I go take Murphy out for a walk when it isn't below zero, and I regularly am stopped by neighbors who are convinced that the Met Council is a part of this. We're not, but the county and the city where I live are, and folks are angry. So giving folks a place at the table before decisions start to be made is critical when it comes to change and development. Thanks for listening to me.
Thanks, Councilmember. Did you want a response from representatives from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, or?
That's not necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Unless they want to respond.
I was just going to say thank you for your comments, Councilmember Vento.
Thanks, Ms. Pachuta. other questions or comments? And I'm not seeing all of you. I have this WebEx weirdness going on. So if you're raising your hand and I'm not seeing it, I apologize. Please just speak up. Questions or comments? Hearing none, the Mr. Collin proposes an action to approve the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Above the Fall Regional Master Plan, and with some subsequent actions as well. And I would entertain a motion to approve.
Motion by Chambers to approve.
Second by
Thank you,
Lee.
Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Lee. And just before I ask for the discussion, well, I just want to say this is in my district, and it's a huge, hugely important piece of property. I really appreciate, Councilmember Vento, what you're saying about getting people at the table, and people want to be at the table as we look to the Upper Harbor Terminal, especially. I was on the Minneapolis City Council when we started to move toward creating this Upper Harbor redevelopment site, and so it's really exciting to see pieces like the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan come forward for approval that are moving the community's vision along. So thanks to our staff and to the MPRB staff who have worked so hard on this. Any other discussion on this motion? Discussion. Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen. Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson. Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Musse.
Aye.
Bento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, council members. That item is adopted, and we will move on to our next business item, which is 2021-38. It's the Gale Woods Farms Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment and Boundary Adjustment from the Three Rivers Park District. And once again, it's Mr. Kelly that's presenting.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay once again?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. I am still Colin Kelly, planning analyst, and I'm here to present the Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment on behalf of Three Rivers Park District. Next slide, please. Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature is located in the western portion of the regional park system. The figure on the left is figure 1 in the staff report. The Special Recreation Feature is located just north of the Dakota Rail Regional Trail and south of Kingswood Special Recreation Feature in the city of Minnetrista. The Baker-Carver Regional Trail is planned to traverse Gale Woods Farm generally from north to south. The figure in the center is figure 2 in the staff report. Zooming in a bit, in the figure on the right, we've got a map of the Special Recreation Feature itself with the boundary expansion areas called out in magenta. This is figure 3 in the staff report. You might recall Three Rivers Park District submitted a proposal to adjust the Special Recreation Feature's boundary during the 2019-2020 Regional Park System additions process. Through that process, the Council approved the addition to the Regional Park System. This proposed amendment is to update the master plan to account for this addition. Next slide, please. Unlike new or updated master plans, or master plan amendments that focus on a refined development concept, for example, acquisition master plan amendments have different requirements as specified in the Regional Parks Policy Plan. Planning Strategy 1 requires that acquisition master plans include a demonstration of the proposed unit's consistency with Citing and Acquisition Strategy 1 priorities, and boundary and acquisition costs to include a list of parcels to be acquired, the estimated total cost for the acquisition, and information on natural resources, site suitability, and other conditions that affect acquisition of the site or location of the boundaries. This slide focuses on the first of those requirements. Citing and Acquisition Strategy 1 states, quote, lands with natural resource features, access to water, and/or recreation potential will be a priority for the regional park system. The Acquisition Master Plan Amendment demonstrates Gale Woods Farm's consistency with this strategy. The special recreation feature and its boundary expansion are located to protect existing natural resources, and upon acquisition, the expanded areas will be restored to reflect the natural communities of the region. Furthermore, Gale Woods Farm protects the eastern shoreline of Whaletail Lake and encompasses Lake Flanagan. A carry-in boat access and fishing pier are currently available. Next slide, please. A little over 20 years ago, Three Rivers Park District received 410 acres of property as a gift from Alfred and Leona Gale. The property was conveyed to Three Rivers for the purpose of establishing, operating, and maintaining a public facility while preserving the farm character for park visitors. A master plan was prepared in the year 2000, and the park officially opened in 2003. The official master plan boundaries have not changed since acceptance of the original land gift. As stated, the Acquisition Master Plan Amendment will formalize the addition of 31.2 acres to the official Gale Woods Farm master plan boundary. The 31.2 acres is currently owned by a combination of organizations and individuals, including the Boys and Girls Club, Jen Olson, and Three Rivers. The Jen Olson property, labeled with the letter C on Figure 3, is the largest of the properties included in this Acquisition Master Plan Amendment. It's 28 acres in size. The properties are all located immediately adjacent to existing park boundaries, again as shown in Figure 3 of the staff report. The boundary expansion allows for additional natural resource protection and consistent management of existing and new natural areas, potential securing of associated Baker-Carver Regional Trail land, protection of existing parkland as one property, and more logical and straightforward boundaries which are easier to manage and convey to the public. Next slide, please. The Acquisition Master Plan Amendment estimates $585,000 in acquisition costs for the 28-acre Jen Olson property. There are no costs associated with the remaining 3.2 acres of Boys and Girls Club property and Three Rivers property. Lastly, approval of this Acquisition Master Plan Amendment does not commit the Council to any funding at this time. Next slide, please. The Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1, Master Plan requirements, as well as other Council policies included in Thrive MSP 2040. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council approve Three Rivers Park District's Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment and approve the boundary adjustment adding 31.2 acres to Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature in the city of Minnetrista. I should note that the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission voted unanimously to approve the proposed actions at its meeting on February 4th. And with that, I'll stand for any comments or questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your work on this and for the presentation. Questions or comments for Mr. Kelly on that report? Any questions or comments? Seeing none.
Excuse
Mr.
me,
Kelly?
Chair Lilligren.
Yeah.
Councilmember Vento has a question.
Thank you. I can't say Councilmember Vento, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm a little chatty today. I've had too much caffeine. Colin, I love this report, and the Gales, God bless them for doing this. This is wonderful. It's this whole idea of a farm-centered park just warms my heart. And Three Rivers has an amazing website. I had never gone to their website until preparing for today's meeting, and the Gale Woods Farm has amazing programs for all ages. Councilmember Lindstrom, you might be interested on, where is it here? March 20th, they're going to be doing Chickens in Your Backyard. It's an online class. So I just want to commend the folks in the Three Rivers District and all of the folks involved with this project. It's excellent. I'm the great-great-granddaughter of an Irishman who came to this country and homesteaded a farm in southeastern Minnesota, and my cousin Dan is still running the farm today. And I love that in an urban area, it doesn't take you long to get to a really special place to get to see the outdoors and to see farm life. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Bento. Further comments or questions on that report? Councilmember Lindstrom, did you want to weigh in?
Well, I'll just say, Mr. Chair, I will definitely check out that tip, Canto. And also I noted that another part of the property is Jen Olson, and I suspect that is former Minnesota State Senator Jen Olson. I don't know that for sure. Be represented in the 80s and 1990s.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Councilmember. Appreciate that. Mr. Kelly, do you have any info on that? Is that?
You know, I have to say, Councilmember Lindstrom was breaking up a little bit on my end, so I wasn't able to capture fully what he or you were saying. Something about representing the world in 80s or 90s.
I think it was that Jen Olson was a state senator during that era.
Okay.
Councilmember Lindstrom was breaking up a little, my end as well, but I think that was the gist.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or questions on the report? Further comments or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly has proposed an action to approve the Three Rivers Park District's Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment and approve the boundary adjustment. Is there a motion?
Cummings moves approval.
Vento seconds.
Thank you, council members. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the motion.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musset,
Aye. Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That item carries, and we will move on to our next business item, which is 2021-47. It's the 2021 Livable Communities Act funding availability, program guidelines, and scoring criteria. And this is certainly not the first time we've seen this in this committee. The committee's done a lot of good work on this, and so today there is a proposed action. So we'll hopefully be acting on this item today, and I will turn this over to Tara Beard to present. Ms. Beard, welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Nice to sort of see you all, committee members. The chair is correct. I'm here today to ask or to offer a recommendation from staff on the funding criteria for the 2021 Livable Communities Act program implementation. Next slide, please. Today, what we're going to cover is an always helpful reminder of the statutory and policy guidance for the LCA funding availability and other criteria that needs to be adopted by council each year to implement those programs. Then a summary by program of the funding availability schedule for the year and key program and scoring changes proposed for 2021. To kind of summarize what we're looking at for 2021. And then finally, a staff recommendation to approve those criteria for 2021 as well. Next slide, please. As a reminder, we look at the requirement in statute that the council shall prepare an annual plan for distribution of the funds based on the criteria for the project and applicant selection. The various kind of program criteria, scoring criteria, funding availability, et cetera, that you will be adopting or recommending adoption of today is the meeting of this particular requirement in statute. The statute also contains a lot of information about the purpose of the LCA programs, which of course is where our scoring criteria essentially is derived from, in addition to our Metropolitan Development Guide, Thrive MSP, and its adjoining documents. Next slide, please. So we're going to dive right in program by program with the details about each program that we've been talking about since November, starting with the largest program, the Livable Communities Demonstration Account. You can see the schedule on the left, proposal for when applications would be due and when decisions would be made. There is a base revenue for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account of $12.6 million, but as you'll see in the next slide, $5 million of that is recommended for the Transit-Oriented Development Program, leaving $7.6 million in base revenue for LCDA in 2021. And as you recall from our last conversation, staff is recommending an additional programming of reserves in the amount of $2.4 million to allow for a total of $10 million for LCDA in 2021. And the asterisk you see next to that and the footnote at the bottom notes that $1 million of that $10 million would be made available for pre-development grants. If there aren't enough competitive or applications for pre-development grants, the remainder of that $1 million could be put into the regular development account. Next slide, please. The arm of LCDA that's focused on transit-oriented development, the LCDA TOD program, has a similar schedule, but a little bit earlier in the year for applications due and for committee and council recommendations. As I mentioned, there's a base revenue which comes from LCDA of $5 million, and no additional reserves are suggested at this time. And again, of that $5 million in total funding, we are recommending that $1 million be made available for pre-development grants. Next slide, please. So for LCDA and LCDA TOD, a summary of key scoring changes, and kind of kept these high level, but there's some pretty significant stuff in here, as y'all are aware from recent conversations. A removal of the demonstration and innovation criteria that we just had a hard time linking back to the foundational purpose of the programs and the outcomes of the Livable Communities Statute and the Thrive MSP outcomes. And so while we are definitely excited to see innovative projects, and these projects will certainly demonstrate the Livable Communities Act goals, as specific criteria, they were no longer kind of serving the purpose of the program and helping further the purpose of the program. So as we discussed a lot in November, staff is proposing removal of those subcategories of criteria. We also looked broadly at changes to the point distribution across categories in scoring to make sure they aligned really closely with the statutory purpose and Thrive outcomes that I mentioned before. And I'll just summarize briefly, the statutory purpose in LCA is essentially to create a full range of housing choices across the region, to incentivize living wage jobs, and to create compact connected development that intersects all of those things and connects all of those things. And so that's really the heart of the LCDA programs within LCA. And then of course, with deeper focusing on things like equity and sustainability and other outcomes that that are adopted in Thrive. The next key scoring change we looked at for LCDA and LCDA TOD were to the equity criteria specifically, and we really tried to focus on making sure that equity-related criteria did three specific things. One, that it was measurable, that it was something that couldn't be looked at in too subjective of a way when scorers are reviewing applications. Two, that the equity criteria was explicitly connected and created in thought of the inequity it was trying to address. So some tweaking of specificity in some of the scoring criteria. We also spent a lot of time looking at equity criteria through the lens of, could any type of community achieve these points through some reasonable action, given how different our communities across the region are, both in demographics and in political will and in economic solvency, et cetera. And then we also are recommending this year a new piece of equity criteria scoring, which is looking at a minimum equity criteria. So of 16 points available that are directly connected to equity in the first step of scoring for LCDA programs, including TOD, recommending that a minimum of 10 of those points are achieved by an application for it to move on to step 2 scoring, which is really a strong step toward kind of stating the council's expectations on equity and the sort of minimum bar of addressing inequities in our funding decisions. Finally, we made some recommendations to readiness criteria and the approach toward awarding points for readiness, which historically were connected more closely to the amount of funding committed, and looking at some of the correlations or lack thereof between funding commitments and projects being successful, and as well as hearing from scorers kind of a discomfort feeling like the information on financial readiness really helped them accurately score. We made some changes to readiness criteria to really focus on the local support for the project and the quality of the relationship between the applicant or city and the development team that will be implementing the project. So that's kind of, there's a lot to cover in the key scoring changes, so I did a lot of speaking, but I think that covers the biggest changes we're proposing for LCDA and TOD. Next slide, please. I had mentioned in an earlier slide that both LCDA and LCDA TOD funding availability included an up to $1 million in 2021 as recommended for pre-development, and that $1 million for each of those programs would be split into $500,000 being made available each in spring and in the fall rounds for pre-development. And you see the spring and fall pre-development schedules to the left, which are the same for LCDA and TOD. The spring round and the fall round schedules are the same for each of those programs. Next slide. A summary of key changes in LCDA and LCDA TOD pre-development. If y'all recall back in November, we talked to you about allowing a one-year grant term extension for pre-development projects that previously we had no extension requirements or extensions were not permitted for pre-development grants. Because of COVID, there was a lot of challenges to a couple of the projects that we had funded for pre-development that weren't anticipating COVID's impact on their ability to do, for example, community engagement work, and just some of the general kind of market changes that shifted, some of the ability to implement those grants in a timely manner. And it kind of started the conversation about, we still don't really know what the future is exactly going to look like and how that could impact pre-development activities that we award. So we are recommending that we make that a permanent change and continue in 2021 to allow one-year grant term extensions for qualifying projects, pre-development projects that are not able to fully expend their grant money in the initial two-year grant term. We also, as you noted, since we are recommending doubling the amount available for pre-development funds in 2021, we thought it made sense to think about whether or not we were allowing a maximum award for pre-development that was high enough. And so we are recommending an increase of the maximum grant award from $100,000 per application for pre-development to $150,000. That certainly doesn't mean that we won't be looking at or couldn't recommend a project be funded at less than it asked for, but simply giving us the ability to say we're making more money available. Folks may get a lot more exciting ideas about things that they could do with that money. Really good pre-development work is needed. Let's raise that limit. Similar to the development programs, there is a scoring criteria change of removing the demonstration and innovation criteria and changes to equity criteria that mirror those to development. Next slide. Moving on now, the next two accounts or funds or programs that we're going to look at, the LHIA and TBRA programs. We did a lot of evaluation work in the LCDA programs. The LHIA and TBRA programs are much more focused niche programs geared towards one kind of specific effort. So while we certainly have some proposed changes and did some analysis and evaluation on those programs in 2021, you won't see a significant of proposed changes for these programs. So you see the schedule proposed for local housing incentives account on the left. That very much has to align with and mirror and depends on the Minnesota Housing's consolidated request for proposals, which will be issued on April 14th and applications being due on July 15th. We traditionally don't make funding recommendations until the Minnesota Housing Board acts on their funding recommendations. So that's why you see the schedule before you there. There's a base revenue for LHIA which as a reminder is the LCA account specifically for the creation and preservation of affordable housing of $1.5 million, and staff is recommending an additional programming of reserves to the tune of $2.5 million, allowing us to make $4 million in total available in 2021. Next slide, please. In terms of key scoring changes for LHIA, there are not a ton of significant score changes. And as I think we've discussed before, there is a lot of scoring and evaluating that goes on at Minnesota Housing and by their underwriters in much greater detail than we do. And so we often start to look at and apply our scoring criteria after Minnesota Housing has done some initial analysis about kind of the viability of projects. But we are recommending 2 changes to the LHIA criteria that we use to score once Minnesota Housing shares with us the projects that have applied for our money and are eligible for our money. And that's additional criteria to prioritize new or preserved units that are relative to the community's affordable housing needs and goals. In the past, we just haven't sort of said, oh, this project is in this community and it's for this many affordable units. Well, let's think about whether or not that community has need at that affordability level, or whether or not that community has as much need as another project in another community. So doing a better job of aligning other housing data and needs knowledge that we have across the region, and just using that to think a little more integratedly about where we want to fund LHIA projects. Also, we are recommending changing the number of bedrooms needed to achieve large unit prioritization, which we've done for many years, but we've counted 2 bedrooms and higher as counting as large units. And so just suggesting that 2 units are not as rare as 3 and 4 bedroom units, and that is a very deep need. And so really to get those prioritization kind of points, so to speak, bedrooms would need to be 3 bedrooms or more. Next slide. Diving into our contamination investigation and cleanup programs, the tax-based revitalization account programs. You see both a spring round and a fall round, very similar to years past, and an authorized budget from statute of $5 million with a staff recommended reserves of $1 million, summing a total of $6 million for 2021. And that funding recommendation includes up to $500,000 for the Citing Environmental Equitable Development program, which is specifically for parts of the region that are areas of concentrated poverty and allow parcels that don't necessarily have a redevelopment project ready to go and to compete against other development projects to still do site investigation, and sometimes even cleanup of sites in order to encourage investment where there perhaps prior hasn't been. Next slide, please. Summary of key scoring changes for the tax-based revitalization account are to adjust the minimum affordability consideration. So to receive points that are meant to prioritize projects with affordable housing, units need to be affordable at 60% AMI or above instead of 80% AMI as has been in the past. And that's bringing the TBRA program into consistency with what's counted as affordable in the other LCA programs. There's also some expanded criteria to prioritize projects with equitable outreach and engagement, as well as to support equitable environmental protection. And that also gets at sort of the impact of the contamination on the population nearby and the demographics of the population nearby. Finally, an additional criterion is being added or recommended to prioritize jobs, not just in areas of higher poverty, although that certainly will continue to be a part of the consideration, but also areas experiencing higher unemployment. And that's just recognizing that increasing living wage jobs, is important to look at when we're looking at does that area experience a lot of unemployment? Is it even kind of more of a less of a blunt instrument than simply does that area experience concentrated poverty? Next slide, please. So that is I can't believe that is the summary of what we've been working on over the past year. It's been so much work and it's been so much fun, and I've had so much help from folks on this committee and from the LCA team and from Lisa. And it all culminates in a proposed action to approve the criteria in the staff report and presentation today for the 2021 Livable Communities Act funding availability, program guidelines, and scoring criteria.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Beard, for the presentation, all the work on this. This was a gargantuan task to take on in your new role, and so it's nice to see it coming forward with a recommendation for action. Questions on that report? Questions or comments? And please speak up. I can't see any of you.
Councilmember Cummings, I have a comment.
Please, council member.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Beard. That's a great report. And it's just incredible how much work has gone into this and how important these changes are, both to be sure that they align statutorily and with Thrive and with the goals of this council and so forth. I thank you and your staff for all of this work. I think I know one of the issues that came up in conversation too was making sure that the changes were such that all communities were able to participate, given the various sizes and makeup and demographics of all the communities in our region. And I think that's just critically important. But and just to say again, it's my understanding that at the end of the year, we'll be able to check and see the success or lack of and make further tweaks if necessary for 2022. But this is a huge lift, and I think that it's really exciting to see what you're proposing, and it will be really interesting to see if the outcomes are what we are hoping for. So thank you and your team for all of this work.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. Agree. Okay, now I can see. If I'm off camera, I can see you all. So I'll go Councilmember Wolf and Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Patty, can you mute your keystrokes there? Thanks. A couple things. So in January, the LUAC group had a developer panel that came. It was mostly affordable housing developers, but there was some commercial development as well, that talked with the LUAC members about how things are going in the development world, and also made some comments about livable communities. And one of the big comments that they wanted to make sure that we understood was that there's a lot of money that they have to risk up front in putting together a proposal before they know if they're going to get any money. And the more criteria that we put on things, each pot of money has its own list of things that they want to find. And just for filling out the application, they're having to hire consultants or, have attorneys review things or whatever that costs money. And they're very concerned when there's so many things and so many different things between different pots of money and whatnot. And between that and some of the smaller cities on the edge not having a whole lot of staff capacity for doing that kind of thing, I'm very concerned that first of all, I'm very excited that we got rid of the what was it, the criteria that with the subjective criteria, because I thought, yay, we're streamlining, but we've made it now not as streamlined with all of the equity requirements, and they may turn out great, they may not. But in the past, when we've made really big changes like that, we've traditionally had a hold harmless sort of a situation while we see for that first year how things work out. And many of the projects that we'll be applying this year are already underway in the pipeline, and trying to change things with just a few months before the time to apply, it puts another burden on developers. So I'm very leery of the idea. It was put out at the committee meeting that we could just change that at the end if we don't get enough applications. But to me, that's not very transparent and very subjective to do that. Oh, we're going to change the rules at the end because we didn't, because it didn't work. But that also means that some cities are going to go, you know what, I don't have the time to get this done in the few months that we need to do before we can apply, so we're just not going to put in an application this year. And for me, the biggest priority is that everybody all over the region gets to apply. And with the short timeline and the big changes and no hold harmless, I'm really concerned about that aspect of it. The other part that concerns me is when we did MCUB and when we do the DBE things for environmental services or transportation projects or whatever, we've looked at what is the universe of people that are ready and available and want to do the work. I didn't hear any information about in the development community, what is the universe of people who are ready and available to do the work? And when you set a goal without knowing who's your universe of people, I get a little nervous about how that's gonna play out. I would like to know that there is a bunch of people that want to do the work and just haven't been able to, rather than say, yeah, well, this sounds like a great idea, we're going to try it and see if it works. We owe it to the developers that we're planning on applying this year to have something that's a little more researched and not kind of thrown at them at the last minute like this. So I'm going to be voting no. It's been made clear to me that the rest of the committee disagrees with me, but I don't think it's fair to our developers to change things that much without having actual data on what is the universe of people that are available as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have waiting in queue Councilmembers Lee, Councilmember Chambliss, and then I'll call on Patty. Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the staff and Tara's team and division for this great presentation and for putting this together. I think there's that old saying that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same result or a different result. And I think if we don't recognize that issues like poverty and housing insecurity don't have a geography, and if we're not flexible with how we innovate and change and affect policies, that we can't truly lift up the whole region. And so I want to commend Tara and the team for these innovative changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, I wanted to thank everyone for working on the updates for all of the livable housing programs. I'm very excited about the opportunities. I'm excited about the improvements and the great deal of thought and engagement in the changes. And I'm hopeful that it's going to expand opportunities as it's intended. I'm happy to see the increase in the pre-development award, the extended amount of time, the opportunity to make sure that everyone is able to compete, and the diligent research that went into the thoughtful decisions and the changes. So I'm looking forward to seeing this move forward, and I'm happy to hear from Patricia, whose Metro Cities group provided a letter to us, and getting everyone's take on this is really important as we make a decision.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, and I just want to thank Ms. Armand for being here today and for presenting on behalf of Metro Cities. And please, Patty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and thank you, Councilmember Chambliss, for your remarks too. And I appreciate the chance to be here today. And my only ask on my recognition was I'm very used to the legislature where typically the testimony comes first. I just wanted to make sure I did get a chance to speak to you today, and I will be very brief. So just first, I want to thank the Livable Communities Program Manager, Tara Beard, and all Livable Community staff, certainly for working with Metro Cities as changes have been considered, and certainly as Tara has, become new manager and really done more of a deep dive on the program and recommending more comprehensive changes. We did have a chance, I won't read through the letter per se because you do have it in your packet, but I just want to emphasize maybe a few points that reflect really where the key tenets of Metro City's policy on the livable communities program, stands. Metro Cities did conduct a review of its own in 2018 of the livable communities programs overall. And we did that with a group of city officials and really had a very broad group and tried to get participation from folks who are strong participants and sort of historical participants, as well as city officials that are maybe don't apply or don't think they have access to the programs. So Metro Cities does strongly, again, support the livable communities program. I think we're one of your strongest defenders, and really support a program that does meet the identified both state, regional, and local objectives, because there are many pieces to the LCA that go into making it successful. Part of it's the statutory objective that exists in law and has since the 90s. Part of it's certainly the regional, the Metropolitan Council putting its stamp of regional goals, and then it's the local communities, the cities that come in and apply for the funding, and they implement, some combination of they get funds and they're able to implement projects that meet those goals. One of the key tenets that came out of our review in 2018, and also the review we did with Tara this year with a group of city officials, we recomprised our task force and worked with Tara to have more discussion as these possible changes were being vetted and considered. And I will just acknowledge that I think given the sort of the more comprehensive nature of the changes, it's really hard to know how they might work in practice. Sometimes we might support something even, it sounds good, it looks good, but it will really depend on some of this on how it works in practice. And I think that of course remains to be seen. Members of the task force that we had in 2018 and also what we voiced again to Tara and her staff this year was certainly we recognize and want the program to continue to be adaptable to changes and to evolving sort of local considerations, the diversity needs of the region, while maintaining and adhering to those statutory objectives as well as Metropolitan Council goals. So we did have a chance to look at these changes, and really, again, a key tenet that gets raised and is part of our policy is we want to make sure that the program that exists is one where every participating community believes and has some reasonable chance of accessing grant funds. It's not to say that they, have, for any grant round that every city gets funds, but there is a persistent perception out there, and it's persisted for many years, that some cities just believe they'll never have a chance at accessing any of the funding, and they may not bother to apply, or they apply again and again and they don't get funding. So one of the things we will be watching for, of course, as the changes get made, and that we are always frankly watching for, is what are the rates of participation? How is the program serving cities? Are the criteria, as user-friendly as possible? Are they sufficiently flexible to meet the variety of to meet cities where they are at with respect to the program goals? So we will be continuing to provide, to monitor those processes, and Tara knows we do that, stand by my word on that. And we will continue to provide you with feedback and input as the changes get implemented. Again, just a strong levels of participation are what ensure that the program survives. It can easily be subject to legislative change. It can be subject to all kinds of things. And over the years, Metro Cities, has had to defend this program at the legislature very strongly back about 10 years ago. And how we do that, and really what makes that possible, is the strong level of participation. So that is important. These programs provide, they advance important objectives of affordable housing, redevelopment, compact development, soil remediation, increasing tax bases. And it really, I think, to be successful in meeting those objectives, it has to have that strong participation. So again, we will be, kind of watching. I know we're at kind of a transition phase with that, but we'll be keeping a close eye on that. I do, again, Mr. Chair, thank you for the time today. I do just want to again thank Tara and her staff, and to thank you as members of the Metropolitan Council for hearing hearing what we have to say, and for working in partnership with the local communities and cities in the region. So thank you very much for the time today.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Nauman. My apologies for not calling on you sooner.
Not at all.
Thanks for your partnership. Yeah, and we look forward to continuing to work on this and many different issues. Further questions, comments? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank Patty for her comments as well. She's been a great resource to us over the many, many years. She's much more diplomatic in her speech and probably explains things better than I do, because she sounded really nice when she said things, and I have the same thoughts, but I maybe didn't sound as nice. But I've had a lot of years of I told you so's happen, and so sometimes I get a little frustrated. It's not that I'm opposed to equity, it's that I'm concerned that how these specific ways of scoring it, and that 10 points out of 18 is going to affect the ability of some of the smaller cities to participate. And ultimately they may drop out if they feel like it's either too difficult and expensive for them to do the requirements in order to apply, or if they think that they're not going to be successful if they apply, so they just aren't going to bother. And that's a big concern of mine, and that's where that's coming from for me. It's not, I mean, the projects that come through are almost always fantastic projects from an equity standpoint, from what I've seen in the past. But we've already lost a lot of cities out of the program for this next round, and I don't want to lose more.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. And I think that the way you expressed yourself was just fine. I think your decorum was just fine, and we really did. Those of us who worked on the housing policy work group, we were trying to make those accessible, even to get to 10 points within the equity. So we will evaluate and see. Other comments or questions? So I don't know if anyone else is having difficulties, but I cannot get back to the agenda through the Met Council website on any device. I've tried on 2 different devices. So Michelle, if you're there, if you have the action in front of you, if you could just please read that out, and then I'll ask for a motion.
You know, sorry, Chair Lilligren, I do not have that in front of me. Greg, could you possibly pull up that slide?
With the proposed action.
Sure, I have it.
Oh, okay, we have it now. Thank you, Wendy.
Okay.
Oh, thanks. Great. So to approve the 2021 Livable Communities Act funding availability, program guidelines, and scoring criteria, is there a motion to approve, please?
Motion to approve by Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Cummings seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. Further discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musse,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Nay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That item carries. And Ms. Beard, and to your team and all, thanks for your hard work. And yeah, congratulations. And does someone have the agenda? I don't, on both my laptop and on my phone, it times out. It won't go back to the agenda for me. I'm not sure what's going on. But if
I can
someone-
help you,
yeah.
or
Thank you.
okay. It is, the next item is 2021-48, the Community Development Committee Work Plan.
Great, and that'll be
Lisa
Director
Barajas.
Barajas. Yep. Thank you, Michelle. Director Barajas, thank you.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members. I don't have a presentation for you today. We did go into depth, but before I get started, I will just introduce myself for the record. Lisa Barajas, Community Development Director. So at our meeting at our last meeting, I discussed with you and presented a proposed work plan for your consideration and your input and feedback, and heard some very strong themes from you around the importance of data and reporting back on our goals, just across all of our programs. So while you won't see that as an individual item on our work plan, it will be incorporated into a number of the items that we bring before you, whether it's information items on development in the region or reporting that Tara brings or her team brings from livable communities, funding recommendations. All of those items will be working more to strengthen our kind of report progress towards goals and reporting back on the work that we've been doing through the year. So what you will see in the posted business item includes, oops, I have Tara's item open on my screen here, but includes just an organization of the content that we discussed at our last meeting around regular business, special initiatives, and information and reports. And you will see that in addition to that, that attached to that, at the end of the item is an illustration of the calendar for the year of where things are likely to fall. Some items will have firm dates associated with action with them. So things like our Metro HRA Public Housing Agency Plan, something that we do on an annual basis, has a set calendar for it. We have set dates for that work. You will see with specific green action items and specific dates within the written report as well. On other items that are a little more flexible or dependent on how quickly we complete some project work or dependent on other agencies providing information like census data, for example, those items may be listed more generally as either a month or a quarter, along with more of a tentative or cross-hatching schedule in the illustration on the report. So you'll see we'll have a number of items that are going to be coming before you in the second half of our year. So we're working very diligently to line those up so we're not overloading your meeting schedule and trying to balance those out over the course of the year. So with that, I would just, because we went into a lot of detail on on the special initiatives at our last meeting, I would just open up to any other additional questions, or if there are items that you wanted to see on this report. But also, sorry, before I do so, I just wanted to also say that this is a general guide for our work. So we try to capture as much as we can at the beginning of the year, knowing that sometimes we get surprised by things like a pandemic, and it throws off our work plan for the year or adds other items to our work plan that we hadn't initially attended. So when we do have those types of changes to our work, we will definitely be in front of you to discuss, as we had last year. Actually, we did on a council-wide basis because it changed so much of our work across the council about what would be changing, what would be new or different, and what might have to drop off. But you have been so helpful in helping us to prioritize some of that work, especially on housing strategies that we discussed in January, about what levels you would put towards prioritization on that, so that in case we need to shift and change, that we are prepared to do so. But definitely want to be transparent in that work as well, and would be sharing that with you in the public meetings such as this. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, take additional feedback on this, and otherwise have before you a proposal to adopt our work plan as is indicated in our business item, and with the understanding that it is modifiable and flexible and may change at the direction of the committee.
Thank you, Director Barajas, for the report and for your work on this. Committee members, comments, questions on the 2021 work plan? Any comments or questions? Am I the only one that's having problems with the Met Council website, or?
Mr. Chair, I also cannot access the council website right now either.
Okay, all right, good. It's not just me.
Not
Yeah,
just
I lost my connection as well, Mr. Chair,
Okay,
but I'll move approval of the work plan if nobody has
Thank
any
you,
questions.
Second by Lee.
Thank you, Council members. Discussion on the motion. Discussion. Councilmember Chambliss, were you going to say something? I see.
No.
Okay, all right. Hearing no discussion, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musse,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That item is adopted. I know Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen didn't get a chance to join us today, and I know she wanted to address us at the end. Director Barajas, do you know what? I know it was about scoring. For the
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen was hoping to just note that she wanted to reach out to members to participate in the Regional Parks Equity Grant Program Scoring Committee, which is a mouthful, but nevertheless, a scoring committee to review those applications. As your approval of that notice of funding availability included, there can be up to 3 members from the council, from the Community Development Committee participating in that. There will be some NPOSC members in addition to a couple of other potential members from EAC and the community. So you may hear from her in email, but just wanted to get that on your radar if you're interested in that participation.
Thanks, Lisa. Any questions, committee members? I expect we'll see email follow-up on this. Any other items, committee members? Director Barajas?
None from me, thank you.
Thanks. Michelle?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Well, seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you.